Hello everyone, this is rkhan and I am a senior at Kansas State University. So my topic of discussion for today's presentation is going to be first and all AppArmor. Then we'll move on to HTTP and HTTPS, and lastly we'll go over some of the hardening techniques for both Apache and IIS web servers. Hey, so we'll start with AppArmor, and the things we'll be discussing moving forward would be the first one would be what is AppArmor, how to view AppArmor status, and how does it keep Ubuntu safe and best practices around safety. So AppArmor is basically a mandatory access control system that confines programs to a limited set of resources. AppArmor is really similar to SE Linux by default in Fedora and Red Hat as well. While they work differently, both AppArmor and Linux provides mandatory access control in security. In effect, AppArmor allows Ubuntu developers to restrict the action processes can take. So, for example, one application that is restricted in Ubuntu by default configuration it's called Events PDF Viewer. While events may run as your user account, it can only take specific actions. Events only has the bare minimum of permissions needed to run and work with PDF documents. So, let's say if a vulnerability were discovered in Events PDF renderer and you opened a malicious PDF document that took over events, AppArmor would restrict that damage events could cause. In addition, in a traditional Linux security model, events would have access to everything you have access to. With AppArmor, it only has access to things that a PDF viewer needs access to. So here, to view the AppArmor status, you can run the following command. It's called sudo, AppArmor_status. And once you run that command, it'll show you whether AppArmor is running on your system, and it will show you all the AppArmor's profiles that are installed and the confined processes that are running. So AppArmor is particularly useful for restricting software that may be exploited, such as web browser and service softwares. So, it is really important to enable AppArmor. I'll give you one example. You can enable AppArmor for Firefox. It doesn't come enabled by default. You may also notice that AppArmor comes with Firefox profile. Usually it resides in user.bin.firefox file. So in order for us to run AppArmor or enable an AppArmor, we would have to run the following command listed on this slide. And once you run these commands, it will enable AppArmor. For example, on Firefox, this would be a primary example we are using here. And after you run these commands, it is necessary that you run the AppArmor status command to check the status, and you will see that Firefox profiles are now being loaded. Now I want to take a minute to talk about HTTP. HTTP basically stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's a communication protocol that uses the client-server model and operates in the application layer. Although it is stateless, which means it has no memory of the past connections, and it doesn't take into account for their state on something like a table, and default port for this would be 80. There's a variety of HTTP request methods. The two primary ones are GET and POST. In such case, GET requests data from a certified source, and POST submits data to a processed to be specified source. GET requests can be cached and remain in browser history, while the POST method requests are never cached, and they never make it to the browser history, and they can even be bookmarked. And they also have no restrictions on data links. The next one is head request method, which is the same as GET, but it returns only HTTP headers. Put uploads the representation of this specified URI, and delete is a specified resource. Option, on the other hand, returns the HTTP methods of the server supports, and connect converts the request connections into a transparent TCP IP tunnel. So HTTPS is also known to be a secure version of HTTP. HTTPS, which stands for HTTP Secure, uh, or HTTP over SSL, or TLS. It is used by any website that needs to secure user communications and is the fundamental backbone of all security on the internet. HTTPS is also increasingly being used by websites for which security is not a major priority. Um, when you visit a non-secure HTTP website, all data is transferred unencrypted. So anyone watching can see everything you do while visiting that website if you're using the HTTP, including things such as your transaction details and when you make your payments online. So in all browsers, you will see a locked padlock icon to the immediate left of the main URL search bar. If a padlock icon is shown, then the website is secure. If the icon is green, however, it denotes that the website has presented your browser with an extended validation certificate. It's also known EV. These are intended to verify that SSL certificate presented is correct for the domain name, and that domain name belongs to the company you would expect to own the website. So in theory, then you should have greater trust in websites that display a green padlock. Um, HTTPS web pages are secured using TLS encryption with the chipper and authentication algorithm determined by the web server. To negotiate a new connection, HTTPS uses X.509 public key infrastructure, also called PKI, as asymmetric key encryption system, where a web server presents a public key, which is decrypted using a browser private key. In order to ensure against a man-in-the-middle attack, X.509 uses HTTPS certificates, small data files that digitally bind a website public cryptography key to an organization's details. So here we'll talk about LAMPS. What is LAMPS? So LAMPS stands for Linux Apache Web Server, MySQL database, Perl, Python, or PHP. The components of LAMPS are largely interchangeable and not limited to versional selection. LAMP is a web application development and deployment environment that, although powerful, is also uh, comparatively simple and easy to use. Individually, each of these items is powerful as component in its own right. So here we'll talk about Apache HTTP server and some of the hardening techniques. So we'll start with the first one, which is disable trace HTTP request, which is very important. Trace enable on allows for cross-site tracing issues and potentially giving the option to a hacker to steal your cookie information. So the solution to that would be address this security issue by disabling the trace HTTP method in Apache configuration. And the next one on our slide is run as separate user and group. So by default, Apache is configured to run with nobody or daemon. It is recommended to not to set user to root unless you know exactly what you are doing and what the danger or impact of that could be. So the solution to that is it is good to run Apache in its own non-root account. So the next one on our slide is disable signature. The offsetting, which is default, surpasses the footer line. The on setting simply adds a line with the server version number and the server name of the serving virtual host. So the solution to that is it's good to disable signatures, as you may not wish to reveal Apache server version and the system you're running. The next one on our slide is disable banner. This directive control whether server response header field. which is sent back to client, includes a description of a generic OS type of the server as well as information about compiled in modules. So it's really important that you disable banners. Next one would be restrict access to a specific network or IP. If you wish your site to be viewed only by a specific IP address or network, you can modify your directory in HTTP confine. So the solution to that would be give the network address in the allowed directive. The next one is use only TLS, disable SSL v2 and SSL v3. The reason for that is SSL 2.0 and 3.0 reportedly suffers from several cryptographic flaws. The next one is going to be disable directory listening. If you don't have index.html under your website directory, the client will see all files and subdirectories listed in that browser. So the solution to that would be to disable directory browsing on your server. You can either set the value of the option directive to none or indexes. Remove unnecessary DOS module, which is the next on our slide. So verify your configuration to remove unnecessary DSO modules. There are many modules activated by default after installation. You can remove the ones you don't really need. The next step is disable null and weak chippers. It allows only strong chippers, so you close all the doors who try to handshake on lower chipper suits. And the next, not the last but the least, is to apply the most up-to-date security updates and patches. It is really important that you keep up with the security updates because it helps you secure your server. So here we'll talk about web servers IIS. Web server IIS is the Microsoft Internet Information Services. It is known to be one of the most powerful web servers from Microsoft that is used to host your web applications. So when a request comes from a client to server, IIS takes that request and processes it and sends response back to the clients. IIS supports HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, FTPS, SMTP, and NNTP. So on this slide, we'll go over some of the hardening techniques we can implement for IIS server. It is recommended that you use two network interfaces in the server. So in that case, you would create one for the admin and one for the network. The next one is install all the latest and greatest, most up-to-date service packs, patches, and hotfixes. It will help you with the security. The next one is it is important that you install and configure the URL scan. The next one is it is highly recommended that you disable all the unnecessary Windows services. It is also important to enforce strong and complex account and password policies for the server. It is recommended to disable Windows guest accounts. In all time, the server should require approval for account deletion. So that policy should be in place. It is recommended to create a new site and disable all the default sites. It is also recommended that you restrict internet-facing interfaces to port 80 and 44.3 if SSL is used. And it is highly important that you restrict remote registry access. And that's all there is to it. Thank you all for your time.